Well, now that it's about 5 minutes after, I'm sure we'll probably be getting a few stragglers coming in because we had many more participants registered. But for respect to everyone's time on the call today, I think we can go ahead and slowly roll into our presentation and allow people to join us. But again, if you haven't already, we would love for you to place in the chat where you're from and what native lands that you are upon. I want to read our land acknowledgement statement from our collective group. We acknowledge the original inhabitants of our various regions and honor the rich culture of the indigenous people found among them. Our acknowledgement reminds us that the land is sacred and to honor the ancestral grounds that we are collectively gathered upon. We pay respect to the resilience and strength that all indigenous people from the past, present, and future have shown worldwide. We recognize their ongoing connection to the lands, waters, and communities and respect the continuation of their cultural, spiritual, and educational practices. I myself am calling in currently from the land of the Tocobaga in Tampa, Florida. And again, please feel free if you haven't already to place into the chat where you're from and what native lands you're calling in from. Leigh and Dr. Etti, would you like to share where you're calling in from and your native lands?
My name is Susanne. I'm calling in from I'm on the land of the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, which is Melbourne in Australia.
And I'm Leigh DeForest. I'm calling in from Wrightsville Beach, North Carolina, on the land of the Wakama.
Thank you, ladies. And again, today we're here to talk about our traveling journey to net zero. We're going to be hearing from presenter Jeremy Smith via video, as he couldn't join us in person today, all about Tourism Declares. And my name is Lorin Augeri, moderating the panel on behalf of Bee Tourism. Brings me back to our fabulous panel guests, Dr. Susanne Etti and Leigh DeForest. Dr. Susanne Etti is with Intrepid Travel. She is an environmental impact specialist there, which is a carbon neutral travel company. Intrepid Travel has been a carbon neutral travel company since 2010. And in 2018, they became the largest certified travel B Corp globally. She leads their climate action work, including things like carbon performance, reporting, transitioning the business to the low carbon economy. And she has extensive experience over her 15 years in social and sustainability management. As their environmental impact specialist there at the company, she's responsible for climate change performance, reporting, and implementing a culture of sustainability within the organization. She's a passionate advocate for the environment and sustainability, and a mentor in the Climate Reality Project. Having lived and worked in 6 countries, she believes in empowering local people through sustainable travel experience while making travel better for everyone and caring for our planet. And Leigh DeForest, joining us from Legacy Vacation Resorts, is a passionate corporate sustainability professional with experience in driving continuous ESG improvement. As the operations project manager at Legacy Vacation Resorts, she is responsible for cultivating the company's 5-year positive impact targets focused on social, community, and environmental impacts. She works across teams at the company to reduce their carbon footprint and overall environmental impact through resort-based sustainability initiatives, environmental audits, and guest education campaigns. And one of her main goals is fostering a cohesive company-wide mission and achieving improved target implementation. And what sets them apart? Why are these companies the focus of our panel discussion today? They both have publicly declared a climate emergency and adopted a climate action plan, as well as set ambitious emission reduction targets in alignment with a 1.5 degrees Celsius future. Today, I'm going to be speaking with them on how they came to achieve these goals and hopefully inspire all of you to seek your own climate action plan. So first up, we're going to be hearing via video from Jeremy Smith, all about Tourism Declares. This is going to be talking about creating your declaration and action plan and taking that first step down to your journey to climate action. So first, I want to put one quick question on the poll for those on the call with us for now, or at the moment. Have you declared a climate emergency? It's a one question poll. I'll leave it up for maybe 30 seconds to give everyone a chance to answer. Yes, no, or in process. A few more seconds. We have some yes, we have some no, we have some in process. Nearly everyone has voted. All right, I'll go ahead and share the results. So it appears that 27% of you have already began to declare your climate emergency and gone through your first step in the journey to climate action. 9 of you have not, and 2 of you are in process. So that's wonderful. So hopefully we can turn those no's into yeses, or in processes at least, by the end of this call. And now we'll go ahead and launch that video.
My name is Jeremy Smith. I am the co-founder of Tourism Declares, a climate emergency, known often as Tourism Declares. And this is how we got to where we are over the path of our short story. Let me take you back to 2019, which is the beginning of Tourism Declares. The industry in which I work, tourism, our response to climate change really was slow. It was fragmented. It wasn't something that was reflected in the fact that it's an industry that likes to say we're responsible for 10% of GDP and 1 in 10 jobs. We weren't at the same time addressing climate change with the same sort of scale of urgency or prioritization. And you could see from looking at where companies and organizations were delivering any form of carbon reductions or work on climates, that it was led by a common strategy. It was, we are planting a tree, we are reducing by 20%, we are reducing by 5%, we are offsetting this much. All in themselves valid things to do, but not grounded in the requirements of climate science at a global level or relating to the specific emissions and responsibilities of a company or organization. These were good things to talk about and put on the website rather than framed according to what is necessary. At a wider level, the sector, you could say, was very much operating in a silo, which is slightly paradoxical for our sector, which likes to say that we are connected across a very wide and diverse supply chain and have huge impacts on such a wide variety of different industries. And yet, when you looked in sustainability and in climate in particular, if you looked at cross-industry or global frameworks, the sort of collaborations and commitments that we are aware of which B Corp is a perfect example, there was very little representation from tourism, and certainly the representation was in no way paralleled the idea of an industry that represents 10% of GDP and 10% of jobs. We certainly were not featuring on 10% of panels or representing 10% of the membership of large cross-industry collaborations. And when you looked at the likes of B Corp or the ScienceBased Targets initiative or RE100, in all of these, you would find that there would be a very small, disproportionately small representation from tourism. But outside tourism, this consensus was growing of the need for sector-wide, cross-sectory frameworks, the need to align as far as we possibly could and to be able to see comparable metrics and measurements to enable us to deliver and amplify science-based commitments and action. You would pause there for a second, because there's a second sort of part to the origin story, and that is the concept or the meme of the Climate Emergency Declaration. Back in 2016 in Darebin, a suburb of Melbourne, Australia, the community there, the municipality, declared a climate emergency. This was the first time that a climate emergency declaration had been made anywhere in the world. And very importantly, it came out of a local community, and it then spread. And now we're in a place where there's perhaps 2,000 similar community-based climate emergency declarations around the world. These are communities ranging from the size of a village to a country or even a multi-region, such as the EU Parliament and cities like Paris and Barcelona. But all of them are connected in the sense that they are places, cities, regions, countries, or as tourism prefers to call them, destinations. A little later, maybe a year or so after those first community-focused declarations, we started seeing sectoral-based commitments, initiatives such as architects declare, doctors declare, universities declare, culture declares, business declares. And what those of us who began the initiative around Tourism Declares a Climate Emergency saw was that in these two strands, community-focused, place-based declarations and sectoral declarations, what you have is an image of tourism's unique character, the fact that we are the relationship between business and the places and communities that we rely upon and that we take tourists to visit. And that, we felt, gave us a unique opportunity to engage with this climate emergency framework. And that was the conversations that we were having in 2019 to see how tourism declares could play a role. In 2020, in January 2020, against the backdrop of the bushfires in Australia, we launched with 14 founder signatories, all simultaneously publishing a shared climate emergency declaration on their website. And inside of that declaration, we all made the same 5 commitments. We committed to treat this as an emergency, to declare a climate emergency, to treat it with the response that an emergency rather than an incremental risk demands, to publish a climate action plan, a plan for how we as an organization, as an individual, as a company would respond and change the way that we were developing, to base that climate action plan and our response to the emergency in the demands of climate science. Since then, this has become an ever more sort of established framework. But back then in January 2020, when we said that the need is to cut global emissions in half by 2030 to stand the best chance of staying within 1.5 degrees of warming, that was still a sort of emerging concept. But that was the commitment we made. Tourism too often focuses on the long goal of 2050, which is too far away without interim targets. Therefore, we said it's essential to focus on the short term and prioritize the urgent action over the coming years. The rest of the commitment was around focusing on collaboration and sharing of best practice, and then standing up together as a growing organization of membership and working and advocating. We now have 282 members from all sectors, and they range from front runners in our industry, some of whom you're going to hear from after me, to committed beginners who maybe have only just launched their company but are aware that the climate emergency will define their future, and they want a framework and guidance and part of a community to help them do it. And what you see are the likes of Intrepid, who you're going to hear from, the Long Run that brings together safari groups and conservancies around the world, TOA, the European Tourism Association, GSTC, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council that measures and audits all the different certification bodies. Visit Scotland, the world's first national tourism organisation to declare a climate emergency. Scotland as well as the host of COP26 this November. Visit Valencia, the first city-based tourism DMO to measure the carbon impacts of tourism at a city. Glasgow Convention Bureau, responsible for the conventions that include COP26. The Future of Tourism, a coalition that launched a couple of months after ours, looking at the broader selection of issues around tourism's social and environmental impacts and seeing how we can develop a future that puts destinations and communities at our heart. We now see certification schemes beginning to embed tourism declares in their criteria. Green tourism has done this. Global Destination Sustainability has done a similar approach at a destination level, all supporting and rewarding people looking for certification for making commitments around climate action planning and framing their response in the needs of science. And then beyond our membership, we continue to expand industry collaborations to further spread alignment with these frameworks. Future of Tourism, who I mentioned, the UNWTO, UNEP, Nextdoor, which is the European regional leaders, including Scotland and Flanders and Lapland and Catalonia and Lombardy, coming together to see what sustainable tourism at a regional level in Europe. We're working with Race to Zero, who align the various net zero commitments to see what that looks like for tourism, and the WTTC to talk with the large industries, the leading largest companies in our industry. And finally, I just want to look at how we are focusing our development in the coming months as we build up towards the UN Climate Change Conference, COP26, this November. Right now, we have a global survey of climate action in tourism, which is out, being filled in, being entered by many hundreds of organizations around the world. We've been working on that with UNWTO in collaboration with the UNFCCC, supported by ourselves and ATA, the Adventure Travel Trade Association, and with a couple of universities in the US. That is looking to establish what people are doing, what people are having most challenges with, find some best practice, see where the commonalities and where the gaps are, so we can begin to understand where our industry is. We, as an industry, are playing catch up, and this, we hope, will provide us with some baseline data. We've also been working with the likes of UNWTO, UNEP, the Travel Foundation, Visit Scotland, now with others as well, to put together a high-level declaration, what we're calling loosely the Glasgow Declaration for a Decade of Climate Action, building momentum around shared commitment and strategies. What does it look like for our industry as a whole to make the commitments towards these short-term interim targets of 2030 and then beyond to net zero? We've committed at the beginning of this year to publish climate action blueprints, which are documents, tools, resources, best practice, everything that we can find that we think is helpful to enable anyone who is either a tour operator, working in accommodation or in a destination, to create their own action plan. As someone stares at a blank sheet of paper and tries to work out what they should do for their business, we want to help them move beyond that blank sheet of paper. We're developing methodologies based around the science-based targets and net zero, pointing them towards the best tools, highlighting adaptable and scalable best practice around the world, and bringing it all together. And we're working with a range of organizations to do all of that. And finally, we're beginning to explore how this moves beyond COP. COP is a deadline, but it isn't the end. It is a staging post on the road. It is a very useful way of bringing us together and accelerating progress, I hope. But what happens in the third and fourth week of November and into 2022? And so we are in discussion with various organizations around how these climate action blueprints can be further refined and adapted, and we really truly ensure that they deliver the most useful support for our industry, wherever people are, whatever size of company they have, whatever their particular challenges or the ecosystems in which they work. So we're talking with destinations, with accommodation providers, with tour operators about how to further pilot and implement those blueprints. I'm going to pause now, well, I'm going to stop now and hand over to some people who are working very closely on sustainable tourism, who I've been lucky enough to work with closely here at Tourism Declares, and who can bring it into the context of the bee tourism movement. So thank you very much indeed for your time. My name's Jeremy Smith.
And thank you via video to Jeremy for sharing that wonderful information about Tourism Declares. And now we're going to be hearing from Leigh about the Science-Based Targets initiative, what they are, how to set them, and a little bit more behind what they can do for your business. Thank you, Leigh.
Awesome. Thanks, Lorin. And thanks again to Jeremy for that wonderful video. So let's go ahead and hop into the science-based targets. So today I just kind of wanted to discuss the basics here with you, and then hopefully you guys can kind of get a good grasp for it, and then kind of set you on your path to setting your own science-based targets. So what are science-based targets? So in 2018, the IPCC warned that global warming must not exceed 1.5 degrees above pre-industrial temperatures to avoid the most catastrophic impacts of climate change. Now, obviously, business has a vital role to play in driving down emissions and building a more resilient zero emissions economy. So science-based targets show companies how much and how quickly businesses need to reduce their emissions to prevent the worst impacts of climate change, and also lead them on a clear path towards decarbonization. So the Science-Based Target Initiative serves as the lead partner for the Business Ambition for 1.5 degrees Celsius campaign, and partners with the UN Global Compact and the We Mean Business Coalition, which serves as an urgent call to action that mobilizes companies to set net zero science-based targets in line with the 1.5 future. Over 1,200 companies are leading the way in setting these science-based targets, and over 600 have signed on the Business Ambition for 1.5 commitment. So who can join the SBTI? So companies from all sectors and all sizes can join the movement and can commit to setting a science-based target. The SBTI especially welcomes companies from the highest emitting sectors who play obviously a very crucial role in ensuring the transition to a zero carbon economy. The SBTI acknowledges that there are lots of differences between business areas and offers sector-specific guidance, as well as for small and medium-sized businesses, there is a streamlined process designed specifically for you. So these are for businesses less than 500 employees. So how can a company set a science-based target? There's a really easy 5-step process to setting a science-based target and to demonstrate your climate leadership. Number one, you need to commit. So you're submitting a letter establishing that your company has an intent to set a science-based target. After that, you develop. So you work on an emissions reduction target in line with the SBTI criteria. Thirdly, you submit that target and present it to the SBTI, and their team of experts complete an independent validation process. That is the third step. And then fourth, you are communicating. So announcing your target to your stakeholders and letting them know that you are setting science-based targets, why you are doing it, and why it's important. And then lastly, disclose. So you report company-wide emissions and track your progress annually. So what kind of guidance is provided by the SBTI? So the SBTI provides comprehensive guidance throughout the target setting process. Companies can also browse different case studies, attend events, and a wide range of other resources are available on their website. And we'll be providing some resources at the end of this presentation so you guys can easily access all of those. And then how do they validate a target? So to determine if a target is science-based, their team of experts will review your submission through those 5 steps I just listed and validate it against science-based criteria, and then communicate their decision with you throughout the process. So kind of with these 3 components, having these best practices to take advantage of the guidance throughout the setting target process, as well as their team of experts that provide an independent assessment and validation of your targets, you can be well on your way to setting science-based targets and furthering your climate action journey. So what does a science-based target look like in terms of a company? So we have 2 perfect examples here that will give us a nice kind of side-by-side comparison of what it can look like. So with Intrepid Travel, they have committed to reducing their absolute scope 1 and 2 greenhouse gas emissions 71% by 2035 from a 2018 base year, as well as reducing their scope 3 emissions from its offices by 34%, and then from its trips by 56% per passenger day over the same period. On the other hand, with Legacy Vacation Resorts, we have established and committed to reducing our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 50% by 2030 from a 2018 base year, and to measure and reduce our scope 3. So I think both of these kind of serve as a really good example because both of us have set our targets and had them approved by the SBTI. However, they do look somewhat different. With LVR, we went through the streamlined small and medium enterprise target validation route. And then looking at Intrepid, they've even gone a step further and set those scope 3 emission reduction targets. So it's really, it just demonstrates the ability for you to customize your targets based on your company makeup, where you are in your journey, and everything like that. So looking at both of our targets, we are still both consistent with reductions to keep warming to 1.5, but it's really kind of up to you. And like I said, where you are in your journey and kind of how your company is established. That's all I have for science-based targets. And I'll throw it back to Lorin to start the panel discussion.
Yes, thank you so much, Leigh, for that insight into the SBTIs. And we are going to dive right into the panel discussion. And Seth, I see your question, so we'll definitely get to that as part of our discussions. But so the first thing I want to kick things off with is, what actions have Intrepid and Legacy taken since declaring a climate emergency? So Susanne, I'll pass it to you first, since we just heard from Leigh. Can you share a little bit about the tangible actions that you've taken so far?
Yeah, that's a good question. So thank you, Amla. Yeah, so probably important going back to January 2020 when we declared a climate emergency. So our climate emergency is underpinned by a 7-point commitment plan. So that's part what also Jeremy explained, that you have a climate action plan. And what this plan includes for us is really around to measure our emissions. So that's a continuation of what we are doing since 2010, since we are carbon neutral. But we're also planning to go 100% renewable in all our offices globally, which also that aspect. And then at the time we did exactly what Leigh just explained, is committed to ambitious emissions reduction target through the SBTi by setting the science-based target in line with a 1.5-degree future. And that really means to reduce our greenhouse gas emission at the pace and also the scale that science says is necessary to limit global warming to 1.5 degree. And so really last year, there weren't very few highlights, but for us, certainly the approval of our science-based target has been the high point in 2020. So that was a big focus since declaring, but we also used last year really to kind of look at how we can rebuild better following the pandemic, and also kind of really sharing our tools and insights that we have built over the years to encourage others in the travel industry to emerge from the crisis more responsible. So one aspect of that advocacy project was that I authored a 10-step guide, how to decarbonize your travel business, which is a kind of a free download that people can access from our website. But the focus is really around kind of sharing our learnings, best practices, and helping other companies to take their first step on their climate journey.
Wonderful, thank you. And Leigh, I'll pass it over to you. Can you share a little bit about the specific actions that LVR has taken? On mute still, there you go.
Sorry about that. Yes, definitely. Our actions are actually pretty similar to Intrepid. Since first declaring our climate emergency back in February 2020, I think Legacy has definitely made some really big strides. Obviously, this past year and a half has been extremely turbulent and a crazy time, but we've really taken the time to even accelerate some of our projects and commitments during this. I think number one, our biggest accomplishment was first establishing our 2018 carbon emissions baseline, and then tracking and offsetting our 2020 scope 1 and 2 emissions for all 8 resorts in our corporate teams. So setting that 2018 baseline led to us officially setting our science-based targets last year. So that was a huge win for us. So we committed to reducing our scope 1 and 2 emissions by 50% by 2030, and again, in alignment with the business ambition for 1.5. So that was a huge win for us since declaring. Secondly, I think co-launching the tourism network in partnership with Forward for Good was also an awesome thing that kind of came out of the pandemic. We created a global travel and tourism initiative among B Corps and other value-aligned organizations who share a common vision for the future of travel. So we hold monthly meetings where we discuss a wide range of topics from cultural heritage to guest education and carbon emissions, sharing best practices, challenge and barriers, as well as new innovations and ideas. Originally, the B Tourism Network came out of the pandemic. We wanted to have a way to kind of talk about the pains of the pandemic and how people were dealing with it, and new ways to bring in revenue and how to keep your employees and your guests safe. Now it's really kind of spun into an amazing monthly meeting where we can talk about all sorts of social purpose and sustainability initiatives. And then lastly, I think really this past year, we've even accelerated our single-use plastic campaign. We initiated a guest reusable water bottle program, handing out over 3,500 bottles in the first year, placing in-room soap dispensers in every shower in all 8 resorts, removing over 10,000 pounds of plastic, and then introducing our sustainable key cards. So I think we have it at 3 resorts now, but on our key cards on the back, we have a carbon label for a 1-week stay at our resort. So this rolled really nicely into our guest education campaigns, educating our guests on how to travel more responsibly and help reduce their impact along the way.
That's wonderful, thanks. And I couldn't agree more that one of the most important things in climate action is education, right? Is getting people to understand and accept that this is something that's not going to happen or that they should be worried about in the future. It's happening right now, and that steps need to be taken immediately to mitigate the effects and try to help the irreversible effects of climate change. And through guest education, I think is one of the most wonderful ways to help with that, because you're sending out little agents into the world to be climate change activists for you as well, and to support companies such as yours who place importance on these sort of initiatives. So I love to hear about those initiatives that and steps that you've already taken, which leads me to my next question what are some of the main challenges that you face when reducing emissions? So I'll pass it back to Susanne.
I think the big challenge is our supply chain, which is also about the scope 3, which we touched on already when Leigh described the science-based target, because we already had measured most of our scope 3, which will include indirect emission, includes your business travel from your operation, but in our case also with all of us, the transport within our itineraries, for example. But for our offices, it's also the commuting, which we had never assessed prior to setting a science-based target. So that's maybe also one point that I want to highlight, that through science-based target, you actually dive deeper into your data, because we measured before already. So we had done already a lot, but by setting the science-based target, you get pushed to do more. And especially in our cases, because our indirect emissions in our supply chain are more than 40% of our combined 1 and 2. So that's also why we set also a science-based target on scope 3, but that's also our challenge, because the supply chain of travel industry is complex. Some things are in our control and we can measure, like the commuting. We did a commuting survey with all our staff in 2019 to understand how people travel to the office, so the mean of transport, but also the distance, because then you can start looking at, can I change the location of the office closer to a transport hub once a lease, for example, comes up again for renewal or change. But then there's also things like travel, business travel. Business travel we can reduce. We've definitely seen this in the last 18 months, and not all will stay, but I think there's also learning in there. But the transport within our trips. So we normally, or from the start of the company, have used a lot of local transport, but in some cases there are internal flights. And that's mainly around sometimes because of the distance, but maybe also for safety reasons, etc. But that doesn't stop us. So what we now as part of Science-Based Target are doing, we're starting to review our top 50 trips. That's a first start in a row of actions that we will do. But by reviewing our top 50 trips for transport, we are basically want to remove and replace the internal flights where possible and where it's safe. In the end, safety of our customers is first. And examples where we have done it already is our trips in China where high-speed trains are available. So that's really, I think, a no-brainer. Where high-speed trains are available, switch them over, like switch the flights over to trains. But then you're looking at Australia, where it's a much bigger, big country, but unfortunately not such a good high-speed network. And that's, of course, then a whole nother challenge. But that just gives you a taste of what we can do in operation, which is a bit more in our control, even around the indirect emissions. But the trips, that's where the 15 years will really help us, because we need also to operate in a net zero economy. So we are doing our part, working with companies like Legacy Resort Vacation. That's what we need, accommodations that are doing the same, which help us indirectly too.
That's fantastic. And yes, I love when people in the same B Corp hub and SBTI hub work together, because that's the way to kind of transition everyone to want to be within that hub as well.
Absolutely.
And I love what you noted about when you get into the SBTI assessment, it helps you identify things that you could be doing even better, or things that you never thought of. Same thing with the BIA. For those on the call who are familiar with the B Corp assessment, I hope everyone is, because this is the B Corp Global Climate Summit, but just in case. But that's something that I love about all these different kind of assessments is, yes, you can look at what you're already doing, but you could be inspired to do so much more and identify so much more. So Leigh, tossing it back to the same question, if you can share a little bit about the challenges you faced with LVR when reducing your emissions.
Yeah, definitely. So initially, a big challenge for us was establishing that baseline to compare emissions to. We had the data, but we just need to understand our baseline better, trust our data better, and then start tracking our monthly utility information. really creating a reporting cadence and being able to educate our internal team on what these data points mean and connecting to them, like why we are doing this in the first place, why is this important, how is it going to help them as well. So that was definitely probably like our main big challenge, was just creating that reporting cadence and having that trust in our data. And that's really helped us a ton moving forward now, just being able to see those reductions, see the trends over the years from 2018 to 2021 now. So that's pretty awesome that we were able to kind of get over that first hurdle. And next big challenge for us is probably going to be moving forward with solar. We're currently in the process of sifting through kind of deciding between community solar versus on-site production versus shared solar. Really going to renewables is going to help us ultimately reach that 50% reduction by 2030 that we're looking to get. So that's our next really big challenge coming out of the pandemic. And then lastly, to kind of go back to guest education, I think that's honestly been a big challenge for us as well. Although our main priority is for our guests to have a fun and relaxing vacation while at our resorts, they are our main users of energy and water. So that being said, I think prior to last year, we weren't doing a great job with guest outreach and education. We were doing all these amazing things behind the scenes, but no one knew about them. So during 2020, especially when we had very low occupancy or some of our resorts were closed, we really ramped up our guest education campaigns through in-room videos, on-property signage, and social media. We definitely don't want to seem pushy or like we're telling our guests that they need to do something or act in a certain way. But we thought if our guests understood our goals and our mission as a business, then maybe they would be more likely to help us reach our goals through simple actions on their end, whether that be turning off the lights and TV when you leave the room, or turning off the faucets when you're brushing your teeth, recycling, using the reusable water we give them. And then hopefully they will take these habits home with them, which is the ultimate goal. So every guest who comes through our doors returns home with a new insight that they can bring to their own personal lives outside of vacation, and hopefully inspire others to plan trips and be more responsible when going on vacations for the planet and the people.
Absolutely. I like to call it like a subtle, gentle, informative encouragement.
Yes, exactly.
It's good to have a soft approach when educating your guests while they're enjoying their vacations, but it's so important, and it is such a critical step because, again, they're like your agents of change that then go home and can inspire their own networks and their own friends and encourage them to stay with places like LVR or travel on trips with places like Intrepid. So it's a critical step for sure, but it can be one of the biggest challenges to get people to understand and accept. So moving on to my next question, it's easy for individuals to feel powerless when so much of the responsibility sits with governments and big corporations. So what small actions can an employee who wants to make a difference take? I'll pass it back to Susanne.
I think just like carrying on from Leigh's point on education, there's probably two parts. One is the education, and the second one is having a voice and take action. By education, you mentioned it at the beginning in the intro that I'm part of the Climate Reality Project, which is a non-for-profit organization and founded by the former US Vice President Al Gore. I got trained back in 2011. It's a free training. It's normally in person, but due to the pandemic, this is all now global and online. But what I found with doing the training back now 10 years ago, it really kind of gave me access to tools, insights, again, a network of other people to really step up sort of my knowledge, awareness, but also giving me the tools to help others to understand the science, the impact, and the solutions to address the climate change crisis. So that's something around education. If you want to learn more about the science, but the impact, but most of all about the exciting solutions that we have at hand right now already. That's a really great opportunity. There is a global training actually coming up in October, so really encourage you. It's online, it's free, and it's a great network. So that's around education. But secondly, within your organization, it's really about use your voice. So that maybe your staff engagement, which normally happens in most companies once a year, a staff engagement survey, use that to really first of all, respond to the survey and use that as a tool and pathway to share your views, also your suggestion idea. If you have a town hall with your CEO, use that as an opportunity to ask a question like, what are we going to do on climate change? Hey, I've seen that impact. I've seen we know we're in a water scared area. What are we going to do? Ask those questions. And another opportunity is also around, lastly, around forming, if it isn't in existence already, a green team. Find other fellow staff members that are interested to make a change. And it might be simple, like to address your waste management in your office, get your recycling right. People often don't have all the information at their fingertip. They think they know where what goes, but maybe you need to do new signs, have your recycling champions in the kitchen at lunchtime to help people, like this goes there, this goes there. So these are kind of things that I recommend you could do.
Fabulous. And Leigh, same question. Tips and tricks for even small actions that individuals can take.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it can be very overwhelming and also seem like a daunting task to tackle the climate emergency, and individuals may feel like they have very little control or ability to make change. I know I've personally felt like that. And it really, just going right off of Susanne's thought on a green team, I think something that we've done really well this past year in Legacy is getting our employees more involved on the individual level. We've created a social purpose champions team where 1 to 2 individuals from every resort and corporate department are represented on a team focused on making a positive change in our company. So I lead the team in monthly meetings where we discuss upcoming sustainability projects, community outreach, and ideas that they have on what they want to see done differently at Legacy. So creating a green task force made up of employees from different levels of the company is definitely a great way to get started, to bounce ideas off each other and just to learn from one another. Obviously, no one knows everything. And I think it's a great way just to kind of connect with other members of your company and really get started. But if creating a corporate team is kind of too big of a leap right now, I think employees just educating themselves is a great first step. A small action employees can take is to understand their own footprint, learning more about how much water and energy they use compared to the average household, or understanding their commute better, how they travel, and where they can reduce their impacts on a daily basis is something I think anyone can take advantage of.
It's true. Small steps turn into giant leaps. Thank you for that. And I'll continue with you, Leigh, jumping right off. You mentioned some fantastic things that you've already done. What's next on Legacy's climate journey?
Yeah, awesome. So I think I mentioned this earlier, but coming out of the past year, our next big focus is renewables. So we are formulating a plan to achieve 100% renewable energy by 2030. So currently we're looking into community solar options and on-site solar production at each of our 8 resort locations. But we are extremely excited to be moving in this direction and actually hope to have a plan of action for our 4 Florida resorts in the very near future, probably in the next few weeks. So that's super exciting for us to kind of hop into the solar energy game. And then I think our next big focus is also going to be around our Scope 3 emissions. We've definitely done a great job thus far tracking and reducing our Scope 1 and 2 emissions through efficiency upgrades within our resorts, as well as hopefully with the addition of solar, that will help a lot. However, I do think we need to do a better job of framing out and what Scope 3 means to Legacy. We've begun creating a system for collecting company travel information and employee commuting emissions. And then our hopes are to shift our focus to identifying our top suppliers and creating a preferred suppliers program for companies with like-minded values and environmentally friendly practices. And then lastly, kind of really digging into and creating a plan for waste tracking and reduction. So those are kind of the next kind of 3 big things that are up for Legacy. But we're always looking to expand our guest education as well, and also our internal team education.
Absolutely. It's a constant journey to climate justice for sure. And Susanne, same question. What's next for the largest travel B Corp in the world on your climate action path?
One is renewable energy, so I'm right with there with Leigh. That one will be with our global footprint. That will be definitely, that's what is on to develop similar to Leigh, like that plan. How do you get there? Because you can't just switch, turn a switch overnight to get them all 100% renewable. But that's really around our scope 2 emissions. Scope 3, I already touched on the trip side. It's really reviewing our top 50 trips and to remove the internal flights, but it's also for the product team to they have now decarbonization guidelines on hand. It's really any product that we're now developing is actually looking at ways and challenging ourselves to have a smaller carbon footprint. So these are really the kind of two big things that we're focusing on, but obviously also around the offices, it's also looking at business travel policies. Yes, we have seen now what COVID with the pandemic with no one flying, but it's also finding that kind of the way forward once travel reopens, but to have a bigger focus on the virtual meetings and looking also at the working from home policies to see where finding the balance of kind of staff being in the office, but also enabling working from home, which also means that you're actually reducing your carbon footprint. So these are kind of more on the policy sides, but that's also part, which is also again part of the science-based targets, like what are the governance you're putting in place to enable possible reductions in your scope 3.
Absolutely. I know that's top of mind with a lot of employees and employers right now is moving forward in a post-COVID world with work from home.
Yeah.
And the effects, the wonderful effects that can have, and maybe the
Absolutely.
not so good ones. So it's
Yeah.
definitely top of mind for so many people. And then I'll just continue on with my next question with you, Susanne, as well. In light of the COVID-19 crisis, right, that threw the tourism industry in complete disarray and turmoil, is declaring a climate emergency still important? Should companies still place importance on this sort of initiative in the midst of now that we're thankfully coming out of it, but still in the midst of a global pandemic?
Yeah, no, definitely. We are still in the midst, and hopefully we're seeing light at the end of the tunnel. My answer is very simple. Yes, it is even more important than it was in January 2020. Like in our case, we declared when the bushfires, these mega fires, were burning here in Australia with nearly 15 million hectares burned, 3 million animals were killed in there, for example, and then of course circulated the globe. The US finished the year off also with quite severe fires. So climate change is not going away. It's actually showing us, the pandemic is showing us, when something like this stops the industry, what it means for our travel sector. But climate change has ravaged, even though we had the pandemic. We have seen a lot of extreme weather event last year, and right now, again, with the heat waves that the most part of North America is going through at the moment, and there's no vaccine for climate change. So yes, if you haven't declared, don't feel it's daunting. And the important part is you are part of a network, of a collective. The first step today you already took to listen to us and to Jeremy most of all, to hear more about Tourism Declares. It's a first step to really recognize that climate change is much worse than COVID for our industry. And we need to work together, and that's really where Tourism Declares comes. You're part of a network, you're no longer working alone, which is similar to the Be Tourism Network.
Absolutely. It's so important to be in community, which is one of the pillars of B-Lab and B Corps in general, because the more that people can work together and collaborate and share best practices, the more will get done, and the more it will feel easier to achieve for everyone involved. So Leigh, same question to you. Your thoughts on the importance, because I have an idea of what your answer will be, but why why do you think it is still important to declare a climate emergency and pursue climate action even in the midst of the pandemic?
Yeah, definitely. So exactly what Susanne said. I think it definitely is more important now than ever to declare a climate emergency. I know for many people, 2020 was a year they want to forget, and it definitely tested us, especially in the travel and tourism industry. But through that test, I think we learned that people are resilient and that we all are obviously interconnected. So, I mean, I think I truly feel that better times are on the horizon with the vaccine and everything kind of reopening. But I also believe that if we don't build back better than before with inclusion and equity and shared prosperity, then I think we do have a very uncertain future. I hope other businesses in the industry will look to see how B Corps handle their COVID response as not only an example of how to bounce back from the pandemic, but bounce forward. So in terms of their approach to environmental and social justice cause, and really taking decisions with all stakeholders in mind. I know at the end of 2019, Legacy was just celebrating becoming a certified B Corp, and we were super excited to use the credibility from our certification to grow the sustainable travel industry. Of course, we did not foresee the next year that would bring travel to a halt. And of course, many companies did not survive the year, and some only did after abandoning their values and their commitments to employees and the community and the environment. I know we were also very concerned that we would need to resort to cost-cutting measures that could delay some of our commitments to declaring a climate emergency and becoming carbon neutral or ending our self-imposed living wage. But I think unlike traditional travel companies, we are one of the almost 4,000 B Corps, and we obligated ourselves to consider all of our stakeholders when making decisions. So just again, I think echoing Susanne, like this is definitely more important now than ever, and everyone should, you've taken the first step just being on this call. So yeah, just continue on that path.
Yes, true. Truer words could not be spoken. And again, thank you to everyone. This is your first step. And speaking of steps, we're going to step away into some breakout rooms now after that arousing panel discussion. Thank you so much, ladies, for your information and insight. And to our guests on the call, we have, I've placed a moderator in each of the rooms. So we'll have, and I'll be jumping around as well. So we'll have, let me just move a couple of people here. All right, I'm going to push you now into your breakout rooms for discussions. The Google Doc is in the chat with your prompts. So we'll see you back here in about 15 minutes. Enjoy. Welcome back, everyone. Hope you had some great discussions. Group 4, you were much better at taking notes. We were naughty in group 3 and we were talking and then I forgot to take the notes. So
Me too.
But it's okay. Welcome back to the main room. And I want to jump in for just a brief Q&A before we wrap things up for today's session. So I want to take a look at some of the key takeaways that group 4 shared. And hearing stories from other companies, yes, that goes back to what I think we've all, myself and our panel guests have been talking about is collaboration, right? So you hear stories from other people, you reach out to them for their tips and tricks on how to approach this and how to take the first steps. But measuring for sure. I'm sure both Leigh and Susanne can speak to the measuring is maybe a bit of a bear, right? You have to analyze, you have to look at it. But then I kind of identify the other side of that coin, back to what Susanne said during her discussion, was maybe it shows you some things you didn't think you could measure, or that you needed to measure, or inspires you to begin measuring things that you should have been.
Yeah, I think I can jump in while there. So Kevin brought that up, and I mean, I really resonate that as well. Is he was saying that kind of sometimes you feel like all you're doing is measuring and you're not making any change, or you're not making the next step. But I mean, I think that's a really important first step, is just measuring and kind of gaining hold of those of your emissions, and then kind of moving from there, like you said, like identifying other areas that you can measure also. But it's definitely the first great step to take for sure.
Definitely. And again, just I'm seeing some other notes here about the power of collaboration, partners instead of competitors. I know that's something we were talking about in our room, is that one of my favorite things about being in the B Corp community is that it's competition is not there. It's encouragement of each other. It's please steal this idea because it's doing really good for us and we know it'll do really good for you. And that's just one of the things that I love so much about the B Corp movement and being involved with different B Corps across industries, is that spirit of collaboration and that sharing of information and best practices. And I don't know if you have more to add to that, Susanne.
No.
Etti.
Yeah, exactly.
Another Susanne. No.
Exactly. No, I think you said it really wonderful. It's just, it's around collaboration, working together, connecting. And I just love even like the exchange today with Leigh. Like, I knew already a lot about what you guys are doing, but I think bringing us both together and showing that kind of comparison, what you did with our targets, just for today, again, for me, it's great learning. And I just love the sense of we're working together to address the climate change crisis.
Absolutely. And I see another one is acting with urgency and building back better. And what Leigh said, it's not about bouncing back, it's about bouncing forward. And the climate crisis is here. It's happening all around us with each passing moment. And what we need to take this aggressive action. We need to immediately do things like declare climate emergencies to not only change and better our own businesses, but also to inspire others that we touch, all of our stakeholders, from our supply chain to travelers that stay with us. So I think that is definitely a critical part, is treating this as the urgent issue that it is, and immediately taking action. And I see, thank you ladies for joining us, Daniela and Christina. We're just kind of talking about ways in which to overcome the barriers and the challenges, and what are the first steps we can take on declaring on your climate action path, from just declaring that climate emergency. There's resources, you have time to create that climate action plan, you have a network to collaborate with, and it's really just this kind of beautiful cyclical community that you can touch upon to look and address what you need to address and to make changes that you need to make. Even in the midst of COVID and a pandemic, that it's time, the time is now, and the time to act is immediate, and the need, or I should say the need to act, is immediate. So Leigh and Susanne, do you have any last thoughts before we kind of round things out for the day? We're sharing some resources on the screen now that everyone here can go to declare that climate emergency, which they even have templates that you can utilize, and you can look at all of the companies that have already declared, look at their templates for inspiration. The ScienceBased Targets website, the Bee Tourism website, where you can learn a little bit more about our global collective dedicated to using travel as a force for good, and the UN World Travel Organization survey, which we would love for everyone to participate in. The more information that we can secure, the better. But I do want to just hand it quickly back to Leigh and Susanne for any final thoughts you have on inspiring our guests today on their climate action journey.
Yeah, I would just say I really appreciate everyone who joined our session today, and these past 3 days just within the summit itself has been a great opportunity for me just to learn from other B Corps and other leaders of the industries. So I was definitely honored to be able to come and speak with Susanne from Intrepid, and thank you again to Lorin and Jeremy for their part in this session as well. But yeah, I'm excited just to continue on our journey, and hopefully some of you will declare a climate emergency and set your science-based targets as well. And feel free to reach out to me with anything.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So yeah, a huge thank you to all of you, Lorin, Leigh, and also Jeremy, virtually. And also really kind of carry on from this is like, make this year about taking your first action. So if you haven't declared a climate emergency, really make 21 about it, to take your first step. And remember, you're not alone, you're walking with others. There are others that can help you. And I also would love to, if you're a tour operator, extend also the opportunity to connect with me via LinkedIn. And just happy to have a call with you to walk you through what is involved, because that's really the power of Tourism Declares, is that we're here all to help each others to move along and take actions.
Absolutely.
And Lorin just shared our details.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Here are our emails. Feel free to reach out to us for any questions or information that you would like to learn, or even just to chat and talk about ways in which you can start your climate journey. And I sincerely want to extend thanks to Leigh and Dr. Susanne Etti. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. And we are just so honored that everyone here took part in it with us. And we encourage you all to take the rest of the day to consider the first steps on your climate action journey. Thank you again. Gratitude to all.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you all.
Bye.